Hello, YouTubers! I'm National Master Luke Calhoun. If you're just joining me, I'm a nationally board certified teacher and a titled chess player, and I'm going over chess openings in this video. So specifically, I'm looking at white repertoire choices, starting with d4. And in my last video, I covered what happens after d5. So in this video, we're going to cover all the other non-d5 moves, like knight f6 and all the funky e5, f5, stuff like that. That's a lot. So I'm going to be super brief here. My apologies. I'll be happy if you want to film like specialist things. I could do a whole video on the King's Indian easily, and I could spend like 3 hours on the King's Indian. So, but in this video, I'm going to be kind of fast. We're going to cover the King's Indian, the Benoni, and the Grunfeld and more, and I'm going to have it geared for like what I think a club player should do in creating a d4 repertoire. So first of all, e5 is just kind of a bad opening, but they're like, people love to cheese you. They're going to do this. They're going to like, you know, these are the clowns, you know, they're going to try to like do what they can to mess with your brain. And like, the idea is to make you feel like a clown. You play like here and they attack the pawn. You're like, ooh, I'm going to guard that. And they're like, ooh, check, attack the king, attack your bishop, attack the pawn. And you're like, okay, block. And they're like, takes. I'm going to attack your rook. And you're like, don't take my rook. And they're like, ooh, I'm going to attack your bishop and your pins, so you can't take my queen. And you're like, oh, don't do that. And they're like, take. And they're like, I'm going to attack your rook. And you're like, don't do that. And then they're like, checkmate. You're a clown. And then you're like, ooh. And then that's why, you know, it turns you into a clown. This is traps only. It's really bad for black. But, you know, winning in that fashion, that's like, you know, drugs. Like it's so addictive. Like once you win that one, you're like, I want it again. Give me that stuff again. Then you become an addict, and then you can't play anything but the elephant gambit all your life. So be very careful for black. This is a super addicting opening. That said, there's like a refutation. So just memorize it really quickly. So you defend this with a pawn just like that. And then the big thing is you don't defend your rook like this. That would lose because of bishop b4. You defend it like this. You're just defending it with your queen. And this is, as soon as you play knight c3 and don't fall for the trap, you're winning, and you'll probably win. Like my record against this is like 80-90%. Like black still has traps, but I mean, this is nice. So for example, like knight c6, I'll give you why this is so good. Rook b1, guarded by the knight. Queen a3, because the pawn was guarded. Then knight b5, the queen is attacked, and the c7 pawn is attacked. The queen can't guard the c7 pawn. This is guarded by the pawn. This is guarded by the bishop. So the best the queen can do is just take this and then check, and you are up a rook, and they can't castle, and the elephant gambit is very sad. Luckily for them, elephants always forget, and they will be up trying to play the trap that they never forget again soon. So knight c3 with the idea of knight b5 or knight d5 is just crushing against the elephant gambit. And so you just have to remember that move, and then you're good. So that's not like super good for black. Instead, a lot of players are playing like something more topical. Let's look at the King's Indian next. The King's Indian like main line goes something like this. And I'll just really quickly put it on the board. And this is like the King's Indian main line after e5 with the like this little tactical trick that you can't actually win the pawn for two reasons. One, rook e8, and then when the knight moves, this pawn is dying. And two is I think you can even get away with this, and the knight is hanging, so black already recaptured the pawn. So it's like a tactical trick. And basically, I'm not going to go over this extensively. I'll just talk about it, and I'm not going to go over it extensively because I think club players should just like generally stay away. And a lot of like my viewers are not national masters or grandmasters, and so they should probably avoid this line for white. And that's because generally black has a bunch of plans that are all kind of neutralizable, but hard to learn. So like one is the positional plan, and that's like they just take out your knight. And then once they take a knight, they install a knight here. So they like play here, and then you don't have this knight to protect yourself. And so then there's a knight in your living room just looking around, like neighing around there, and it's just super awkward. You don't want a pony in your living room. It's disgusting, and it's super annoying. They're not gonna like checkmate you, but they will annoy you. And the positional players do this. This is recommended in like King's Indian Simplified, D6, Lifetime Repertoire. Eugene Pearlstein has like a theories on it where he does the same thing, except like often in combination with knight a6. It's like a light squared strategy. You take out, or dark squared strategy. You take out the knight, and then you just dominate the dark squares. It's very positional, and a little bit easier to play. So I'd recommend playing it for black. It's usually out of book. White players are not as well acquainted with it. But you give off the bishop pair, so it can't be that great. And even after a move like this, later, white has sometimes options of just trading the bishops and not even giving you the dark square. So it's tricky. The other plan that they can do is to play like knight bd7 and just kind of wait it out, maybe play c5. And, you know, generally white fares well against that, but you have to really know what you're doing. And then they have knight a6 with the idea of like putting a knight here, taking here, and then just like all in on your e-pawn. They can even take right away and do that same plan, the open kid. And that's all complicated. And then there's this Mara da Plata stuff. So like after Castle Kingside, this is called the Mar da Plata. This is what like Bobby Fischer played, Kasparov played. It's like super tactical because you get a position. I'll show you like the old main line. It goes like here, 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 here. And it's like, this gets crazy. Sometimes the knight goes here, sometimes e1, you get to choose, and they just like go at you. Like they're just lunging at you. And the computer goes like, you're winning, white. And then you lose. Like the stats are like, it is like very like the computer has a really hard time with the King's Indian. It like always is optimistic about white, and white's always losing. So like there's other plans here. Like there's b4 with a bayonet attack. If you are going to play this line, I recommend a like kind of sneaky line where you play knight d3, bishop d2. And if they play this move, you trade off light squared bishops. It's hard for them to checkmate you with those off. So then they have to play here. And then after here, I recommend g4 because the right move is not so intuitive for black. They have to play g5. If they play this, you just gum up this side of the board. They don't have any attack. And this is like so natural. They also like the temptation to en passant is real, folks. And if they take here, they don't get much of an attack. You can just like put your king here, your rook here, and like they have nothing. And so then you just proceed on the queen side. So like there are like, this is the problem with playing it for black too, is there's so many idiosyncratic systems for white that like both sides have to be ever vigilant. Somewhat better for white is to avoid castling and playing this system. This is what recommended by Sam Shanklin. It's still super tactical after knight g4 or takes. And so I don't know if I'd recommend it. I think it's a lot more like safe at the expense of not giving white an edge, as opposed to those other lines, which are live by the sword, die by the sword. But it's still a lot of theory, and still like it's hard to hold the center. Like you'd be surprised how often one of those pawns fall again in like non-perfect chess, even though the computer is very proud of white's position. You have other options, like after e5, playing the Petrosian setup. There's options with early g4, like h3, g4, bishop e2. There's even options where you play like the sneaky stuff where you castle and like play here, and then you just like suddenly like lunge at them with g4, h4. All of that is fun. You can check that out if you're like a creative player. Generally, I think like against the King's Indian, I'd recommend two setups for club players. So like the first setup I'd recommend is after knight f3, g6 to play knight c3. And this is because you can play it against the Grunfeld and King's Indian, so you cut down your prep. The goal is to play e4 and transpose to a perk. And so you'd have to know perk. I can talk about that in another video. But usually the only way for black to stop you is d5 and then bishop f4. I feel like this is super pleasant for white. So like after bishop g7, the idea is you play knight b5, threaten a fork. The only way to guard it is knight a6. And then you play e3. And then say like c6, you play your knight back. You're threatening to take the knight here, so they've got to move it. The best move is knight b8. But like what club player is going to play knight b8? They're all going to go to c7, right? Because they're stubborn. Or they're going to like let you take it. Or they're going to like come here and like look around. You're going to play a3. They're going to come back shamefacedly, and then you're going to take it. And if they let you take it, it's not so good for them, because like look at these holes. You can play like here into it. You can play here into it. And they get all kinds of weaknesses. So they got to like come back here. And my feeling about this position is that it's equal on paper, but it's just so much easier to play white because you have a really simple like minority attack plan where you play rook b1, b5, b4, and you just attack this. And it's easy to like kind of expand on that side of the board. And you also have this idea of e4 and just kind of opening it up and like neutralizing it. I don't think white has like a huge edge, but I think the thing is these players who play the King's Indian, they're all tactical. They're all like trappy, and this is not their type of game. You're in like a positional London. And they're like that. They signed up for King's Indian, and so like it can be really irritating for them. And I think that's a really good practical try against the King's Indian. I think also kind of fun is to play Bishop G5 and just play a setup where you like don't play, another pawn in the center. I think that can be really annoying too. You can even have aggressive tries where you run the H pawn without a ton of risk. If you're a Jobava player, by all means, knight c3, because then you're going to play e4, and d6 is maybe a Philidor, which you might live with, and d5 is your normal Jobava, so that's an easy fix against the King's Indian. So that's my recommendation, is to just play knight f3, knight c3, or the c4, knight f, bishop g5 systems. I think they're kind of clever, just generally. Okay, let's move on to the Grunfeld. So the Grunfeld is basically the same thing, but like as soon as you play knight c3, black pushes in the center. So you play like, oh, I'm going to play here. And then they're like, no, I changed my mind. And they play here. And the big thing about the Grunfeld is that these knights trading off helps black, because then this bishop can see. And this knight, which is always a problem, it doesn't know what it wants to do in its life, can always go to f6 in these positions if it needs to, because this knight is going to be traded away. And that will give black good prospects. So like you can take, and then black can play moves like c6, bishop g7, knight c6 to put a lot of pressure on the white center. I wouldn't play against this as white, because even though I think white has a good game, it's like you have to defend your center the whole time, and it's hard to figure out what to do. So against the Grunfeld, you can opt for, there's like these systems where white tries to like play it coy by like taking back with the queen and not allowing the knight trade. That's fine, but there's just a ton of theory on it. That's recommended in Sam Shanklin's Lifetime Repertoire D4. If you want to take it, I think it's called the Russian system. There's another option, if you're a Catalan player, is to start G3. And this idea is that you'll be able to like guard the square and then play E4 from the side. There's still some tactics after like D5 and then the knight comes. But generally, I think white is doing okay here, as long as you're okay playing this against the King's Indian as well. And it tends to lead to a quieter, more positional game. But there's a lot of theory because it's topical. Like black has like A6, B5 ideas and stuff like that. So not my first choice, but if you play the Catalan and you're okay with theory there, then you might as well learn the theory here with G3. Another plan is to play F3. I quite like this plan because black is usually best off turning into a Benoni, and that irritates them because they all want to play E5. But it is, again, a lot of theory. This is like very positional. White will like develop and just like make sure the knight can't move over here, and it's all very slow. This knight will come here, or like here, and like you just kind of maneuver. This is a favorite of Karpov, and I would recommend this if you love theory and you're super positional. So like the F3 systems tend to have a positional vibe, in my opinion. It's no accident that Karpov loved this. It's called the Samish. That's also an option. So against the Grunfeld, like my favorite for a club player is one of two. Either keep it simple, so like just play knight c3 and then play that other system, and then you're fine. Or you have this other option. I already kind of talked about this earlier, where you play knight f3, g6, c4, bishop g7, and on knight c3, you're ready for like a King's Indian or something. And if they play d5, you play bishop g5. This is like, I think, pretty simple for white to play without a lot of theory. The idea is you just don't let the knights trade. And if they play something like this, you can play a variety of moves. Probably simplest, what I would recommend for most club players, is to play takes. And then on here, you take back, come back here, and you play e3. And I like this because your goal is to just play a minority attack. If you look at this, it's like a Queen's Gambit exchange variation. So that same like strategy I told you about earlier, where you're going to play b4, b5 and stuff, can be enacted. I think black has to play like weird moves like bishop f8, and many of them don't know to do that against like b4 right away. And So I think, like, practically speaking, you'll probably be fine playing this. If you start playing against better opponents, you can play this super tactical. That would be to play takes, e6, and then queen d2. And then this line is like weird. You play like h4 and h5, and you castle queenside, and you know, it's fun, it's exciting, and it's energetic. Black has the 2 bishops, so they're not worse, but I mean, look at the king. So it's a game. So that's the super tactical variation. And then finally, there's been some, you know, Magnus Carlsen has like tried to switch it back to like a normal Queen's Gambit declined, and you get a position like this. I like these positions too. I feel like white is very solid, and with your pawn here, creating that like pyramid, that London pyramid, it's just harder for the Grunfeld players to really get a lot of play, which is what they thrive on. Black's not worse, but it's just like it's very un-Grunfeld, so you can kind of mess with the Grunfeld. So that'd be my recommendation. The Grunfeld, like, as terms of like a feeling, like those type of players are very dynamic. They like excitement. They don't really care about their structure as much. They're often very solid, but they rely on piece activity. So it's kind of has like a little bit of a tactical feel. Like Gary Kasparov like played the Grunfeld. Fischer tried the Grunfeld many times. He didn't have a feel for it, but like he loved it, even though like it didn't always work out for him, and he eventually just switched to the King's Indian. But those are Grunfeld players. Okay, so we now turn to like the gambits, like the c5 stuff. This is the Benko Gambit, and white has the option of declining it with queen c2 or declining it by after a6 playing b6. And I recommend that you decline it or that you don't push when you're first starting. I mean, like, obviously, this is not a reason to not play d4, because you can always play e3, and yeah, you get an isolated pawn or something, but you're not worse. Or you can like take, and you know, you've lost all your semblance of an edge, but you're not worse. And and it's not even like that horrible. If you played like knight f3 here and they play c5, you can like really take. This is like play a3, b4, bishop b2. Have a good bishop, and then call it a day. I think this is recommended and Keep It Simple by Silicki. His D4 repertoire kind of like features lines like that. He gives all these details on like how to play it. But that's like a decent way to play against it. Generally speaking, the Benko Gambit after c5, d5 is a really good opening to like play as black, because it's very simple, like the plan, which is generally after like knight c3, d6, e4. Black's just going to like pile on the pressure down these files, put a bishop on this long diagonal, and argue they have compensation for the pawn. Like, you can promote this pawn here if you get it all the way to the end, but how are you going to do that? It's like going to go into the dragon's den. You're going to toss the ring into Mordor, and it's going to melt before it gets to the end. So like, you have to be very, very careful. It's playable for white if you want to like play for an edge. My big recommendation is try to control that diagonal and try to create a fortress. So there is like a fortress. I'll set it up for white. So you can say black will have to like mess up to allow you this. I'm just going to pretend black is like just floating and doesn't understand. This is generally really good for white if you can accomplish this. Because now there's no pressure here because this is defended. And there's no pressure here because the knight clogs the hole. And so this is the kill setup that white always is trying to do against it. A lot of theory, and you can still go wrong even if you know it. So I'd recommend when you're first beginning, don't do it, or know your theory. The Kali system is also a nice response. So like, remember, if you're playing knight f3, you can always play like c3 or e3, and then just kind of play the London or the Kali or whatever else you're interested in. This is the advantage, is they kind of like carry over to knight f3. The Benoni is also interesting. So after like knight f3, e6, c4, c5, d5, takes. This is like the Benoni structure. Probably more proper would be to ensure it with knight c3, because it will kind of show you the range of white's options. So if you're the Benoni's idea is to like pressure this e-pawn, and so I think that white really has to know what they're doing. And I would recommend not going into it when you're first starting. So like here, if you do play this, just play like e3 on c5 or play like knight f3. And again, like the Benoni is not a reason not to play d4. You'll survive. It's not the end of the world. Like here, they like can like try to attack your knight, but like you have options, and it can be a very quiet game if you want it to be, much to the sadness of many Benoni players. But if you do have some spare time, studying it is kind of useful. It'll teach you a lot about chess. And there's a lot of different things you can play against it. The reason why a lot of players don't play the Benoni is because of the Taimanov attack with bishop b5 and f4, that kind of combo. I think f4 first and then bishop b5. But that's really tactical and hard to play for both sides. So I would say for most readers, I wouldn't recommend that. I would recommend like two openings. Like one is pretty simple, which is after g6, you play h3. And after bishop here, you play like here and here. And you just aim for bishop f4 and you attack that pawn with everything you've got. Like, so this knight can come here, here. This knight can come here, here. Whenever they play here, you block it. This is topical. There's like a big line that's kind of complicated with b5. You can almost wing it if you just take with the bishop, though. Like, you can almost just wing it. Just be very careful. But that would be like a simple line against it. Some players recommend just like playing bishop f4 and then e3, so they can't even attack anything on the e file. That was Alonso's recommendation in D4 Lifetime Recommendations. It's decent. It's also recommended by, I think, Volkova and in D4 for ambitious chess improvers, because it's like safer. So like if you're feeling like wary, you can also just push your pawn up one. It's humbler, and then later go for like an expansion here. The Benoni, unfortunately, there's no really like easy symptoms against it. Like G3, black always has something. Black's always worse. Like you put it on the engine, and it's like everything is kind of good against the Benoni. But they kind of rely on the fact that you don't really know what to do, and it is hard to say what to do. Like generally you want to play the E5 push, but when to play it requires a lot of practice. So that's why I would recommend maybe avoiding it in the beginning until you've really studied some model games on like pushing in that E5 push, because it's not easy. Okay. So that's the Benoni. We get to the Benko Gambit. The Budapest Gambit. That's after e5. And then you can take. So like the Budapest, you can always avoid a knight f3. And like knight f3 allows b5, but like no one plays b5. And it's hard to know what black is doing. They're stopping c4, but you can live without c4. Like you can play other moves. So you play c3. It's not a big deal. This is like very high thinking and maybe in Grandmaster chess, but the club level it's almost unheard of. And the Budapest Gambit is more heard of, so this is just an anti-Budapest. But let's just say you allow it. I'll give you a quick line against this. So what I would generally recommend is usually like if black will check you at some point. So they're going to play like knight here, and then they're going to play check. And the point of this opening is that when you play knight c3, they're going to double your pawns and then laugh your isolated pawns. Which are everywhere. You have double pawns here, double pawns there, double pawns everywhere. We're saying double, right? And I think white is still better here, but it's tricky, and there's like, you're going to play a queen here, and they know the theory on this. So like for me, the simplest way against this is to play knight bd2. And the idea is that on queen e7, e3, knight takes pawn, like bishop e2. Well, first we can trade. And then like bishop e2, and if they castle, and if they play d6, which is common, you play knight b3 and a3, and then this bishop is yours. You have the bishop pair, but not a pawn, and that's okay. You just have the bishop pair. So I don't like it's so simple, and it doesn't allow black like a lot of other tactics. So this is how I play against it. It's you can try to win the double if you like the extra pawn, but it's going to be doubled and isolated. And that uglification of your pawn structure doesn't bother you. You can go for knight c3, but this is just like a very, very positional way to play it. There are other options to be sure. So like there are options where you go for like a quick e4 and an f4, and you let them take it. This is you have different options to Budapest. Ultimately, the Budapest is sound. There's no refutation. That's why I'm okay just winning the bishop pair. It's like, okay, I'll just be like slightly. And there's one trap to watch out for. So before I let the Budapest go, let me just show you how you die. So like bishop f4, this is every Budapest player's dream. Here, they check you. And then against this move I'm recommending, they play a move like queen e7, and then you play like a3, and then they take this pawn. And there's this trap very clever. It's very clever where that you take the bishop and then that's checkmate. So like just don't fall for that trap. As long as you don't like push a3 too early, you're fine. So you just play e3 and you hold back on a3 until the last minute. You just play like you castle and then you play knight b3 and the last move you ever play is a3 and then you have a good game. So that's the Budapest. They can sometimes you'll see like people like double sack, like you know, e5 takes, d6 takes. But this is you should just develop your pieces and it's considered unsound, so you don't have to worry too much about that. Okay, so we've covered the King's Indian, the Elephant Gambit, the Grunfeld, the Benoni, the Benko, like on a super brief level. Again, I'm happy to go into more depth later. Let me like end by covering the Nimzo-Indian and the Queen's Indian, and maybe last is my treasure, the Old Indian. So this is only going to appeal to the Queen's Gambit players, because if you're a London or Colley system player, then on e6 you'll just play your setup. So Colley will play here, or maybe here if they're playing the Zuckertort, and the London systems will play here, and the Tories will play here, and the Jobavas will play here, and this is just a playhouse for all of White's openings. But if you are a Queen's Gambit player, then you have a big decision here. Because, you know, this is going to be linked to whatever your opening is against d5, because maybe Black's playing a Queen's Gambit decline, maybe not. So the goal here is often to say that if you play knight c3, they're going to play bishop b4. This is called the Nimzo-Indian. And if you play knight f3, they will either, play the Benoni, where you don't have that f4 attack, not the biggest deal in the world, I don't think. Or they will play the Queen's Gambit, where if you play the exchange variation, you've committed the knight to f3, you don't have the Boffinic plan. Clever. And because you develop your knight to f3, the bishop actually can come out in this system. Like, there's no way to stop it. So, like, you can try as you might, but, like, they're going to play g6, and they're going to get it off. And they're going to have a not-so-bad game in these setups. So that's the idea. Now, if you play like the normal Queen's Gambit decline with that bishop f4 stuff, not a big deal. If you play the Queen's Gambit decline with like e3, you don't mind that, not a big deal. But that's just what to be wary of with knight f3. Okay, knight f3 is the Queen's Indian, and it tends to lead to positional games. This is like a typical line, and like bishop b4 check can be played. This was like the old main line. A more active variation of it is to play the bishop here and attack this pawn. And get him b3 and argue maybe you're a little weaker for having played b3. It doesn't seem like much, but like, you know, maybe a little weaker. And you get this type of setup. This position has always been pretty good for White, though, because you can just take here eventually when they play it. And then when they play c5, you just like, I'll give you an idea. Like, let's just say we like castled and they eventually play d5. I think like knight e5 is the book move. But say like you just, we got this position eventually, and you put a rook here. You can see that you're going to like elicit a ton of pressure on this backward pawn. There's a ton of pressure. And because of that, eventually it's only a matter of time before it pushes. So like, let's just push. Then you'll take. And if they take back with a piece, this will be isolated. And so you can occupy the square in front of it. And if they take back with a pawn, then all game, you're just going to hound these two pawns in the center. And they're holdable, but they're annoying. So like people have been trying the Queen's Indian. Like I remember Karyakin tried it in a candidates tournament and was playing it, and he drew with it. But it was like he always getting hanging pawns, and White was always getting like comfortable attacks against it. And so it's not so popular with Black right now, because the Queen's Gambit decline just seems like the better option. But some players are still sticking to the Queen's Indian. Right now, I think the main line against knight f3 is to switch to d5. Or like maybe the Bogo Indian, which is okay, but a little drosh. Like White has good setups with blocking with either things. You don't need to know a lot of theory. You just kind of play normal moves as White. So we move on to like the Nimzo-Indian. This is if you play the Queen's Gambit exchange, so you're like forced to bring it out. You still want the f3-4 plan. Like you have to bring it out, and then they pin it, and they pin it to win it, and they're gonna like double your pawns and like attack your stuff, and it's quite annoying. There's different lines against this. This is the same-ish. You usually lose one of these pawns, but you get like this huge center, and you get to attack. So this is really nice for attacking players. Queen c2 is like the classical main line played by Capablanca, much more positional, aiming to just recapture with your queen. And then like knight f3, e3, knight g3, bishop d3. These are all lines, just tons of theory. And like black's very fluid too. So black can opt for like these lines with c5 or these lines with d5 or hold back with b6, bishop b7. They're just like, it's so fluid for both sides. It's a lot of theory. I would recommend the simple bishop d2. It's probably the easiest way to play against it. You don't even win the bishop pair really, because after they take, if you take back, they can win this back. Like it's just a matter of time before you get into trouble with it. And they can like wait. They play c5 first, and then they play here, and then it's really, you lose the bishop back. But it's like a nice out of book move, and it gets you a game. And I don't think the play is super forcing after this. So this is a good Nimzo-Indian retort if you have to go into it. Okay, so that's a Nimzo-Indian, very, very tricky, and there would be like, I could talk forever about all the different variations you could play against it. Very high theory, very tricky unless you play like bishop d2 or something quiet against it. And of course, you can always play knight f3 as long as you are accepting that your exchange variation is not going to be that great. So like you play like e3, and then you just play your quiet systems, and you admit that you're not better, but you're not worse, and maybe this is a good reply. You call them on their bluff. Okay, so finally we turn to the Dutch and the Old Indian. So the Dutch is after f5. I've always felt that this is not super good, but like white has to be, careful. The key is that this bishop is really bad. So generally speaking, what white does is plays g3 so that they can get this bishop out before this bishop can see the light of day. So like after, say like b6, black is, because of the threat to the rook, black is forced to clog the very diagonal that they wanted to live in. And so then now it's not even very appealing to live there because the bishop can't even see when they're there. So that's kind of the idea. This is why this is the main line against the Dutch. And as white, I think you can play the main line. I don't think there's any problem with it. All the Dutches are pretty much the same except for the stone wall, which is you just want to play e4. So like just try to play e4. So play c4 and go for e4, and then you're better. So like this is the classical Dutch. Play bishop g2, and then like I don't know, c4, bishop e7, knight f3, castle king side, d6, knight c3. And the old main line went like queen e8, rook e1. Since like black's been experimenting with like a5 and knight e4 with unclear results as to like whether black is okay. I don't really believe black is okay, but like knight c3, queen e8, rook e1. And the old line used to be like queen g6, and black would like try to accomplish something on the king side. The problem is you can get off this. And anytime, your general rule when you're playing white is anytime you can get a structure where this pawn is backwards, you're just winning. So for example, here, you're just winning because the pawn is attacked, and if it ever pushes, it will become a dead pawn or an isolated pawn, and so it's over. And this is brought to you by Tactics. Coming to a neighborhood near you. If they play here, then this wins the queen. It's totally trapped, even though it's in the middle of the board. It's like shocking. A well-known trap in the classical Dutch. And against the Leningrad, you're basically trying to do the same thing. So like against the G6 systems, you can choose. I personally like just b3, bishop b2, because I know they're going to play for e5. All these Dutch players play for e5. And then whenever they play e5, you always take. Is another good rule to know. And so you just take it, and you'll play for e4. So same basic plan. So I think the Dutches are pretty easy to play against. The stone wall is like an exception. It's like a little weird because you're never going to play e4, which is kind of the idea because that was such an anti-Dutch. But the problem is this hole here. So the key here is all you have to know is what Botvinnik said about this line, which is you want knights here and here. So I'll give you an example of like how you could do that. You'd like play it in and say like they developed like quietly. You go like this. This knight would come here, and then you'd come here, and then you'd come here, And finally, this knight is going to come in here. You have the knights here and here, the ideal Boffinic squares. From here, there's like all kinds of sneakery. Like you can attack the e6 pawn, you can come in here. And the nice thing is if like they pop in with this knight here instead of this knight, when they march, there's nothing to attack here. And you have f3 to like kick away the knight. And then possibly e4, the dream anti-Dutch move, and then you have a good position. For those of you who are wanting like less theory against the Dutch, you do have the prospects of, g4 is quite a tricky move for white to play against. So is e4. These are like kind of sound games. Sometimes Dutch players, for that reason, will play e6 and only on c4 play f5 to kind of weaken some of these gambit tries. And there's also like another problem for Dutch players is there's these lines like knight c3 and bishop g5, which are playable sidelines. Because like it's just annoying. And like you can just kind of tempt, and then there's this well-known trap. You play here and you go like here and then it's checkmate. So like, or if you want to be cautious, you play e3, threaten checkmate, and when they block it, you bring back the bishop and they can't play it because you got an e3. And then look at this, it's kind of awkward for the white king. It's like breezy. It's cold on that side of the board. And so that's that. I would say if you don't want a lot of theory, then playing an early bishop g5 is awesome, because it's just like against the Leningrad, same thing, classical stonewall. You don't care what they're playing, and if they play here, you take. And you just wreck their pawn structure, and they don't get the normal f-file attack, which they love in the Dutch, and their position just looks a little weird. If they Leningrad it, the bishop's kind of funky. If they're stonewalling it, they don't have a knight to come in here. If they're classical Dutching, they can't play e5 because they don't have an e-pawn. So like it's just a knight's out of book move when you're first playing against the Dutch, and then later you can play for those e4 plans. Let's finish with the Old Indian. The Old Indian just refutes d4 is the issue. No, I'm just kidding. I wrote a course on the Old Indian, so I'm of course biased, but the Old Indian is to play like a King's Indian. So like let's get into it. d6 or knight f6 first. And then usually knight bd7, and then e5. And the Old Indian is super, like black's going to play here, here, here. And unlike the King's Indian, there's more defense of the d6 pawn. And it's a little faster because they didn't waste a tempo on g6. And there's oftentimes attempts to expand on the queen side and just kind of roll you over there. I won't, like, this is rare. One of the reasons why I wrote a course on it is you don't see it very often. So I'll kind of be fast with the white side. One option for the Jobava players is to just play knight c3 and like try to transpose to a Philidor or Perk. And for those who don't like that, I think like one of the trickiest sidelines you can play, which like if you have my course, you'll have an antidote to this, but it's decently tricky, is bishop g5. And if you don't mind tactics, the goal is to play e3, queen c2, and castle queenside, and then just open up this d file, and black can like get murdered. So if they play like Old Indian moves, and a lot of Old Indian players are not into variation. They play the Old Indian because they're like the same thing every time. So again, in my course, like I emphasized, we don't do this, but like this is like you castle and you play queen c2, and they can get into a lot of trouble really fast. Like a good example is actually like bishop d3 is probably even better. Good example is like h6, h4, and like you take, they come back, and you can play like, I don't know, this is the dream. and you're mating very shortly with stuff like this. And it gets really tactical. And if they don't take the bishop, then like g4 comes and you play queen c2, castle queenside, and you just attack. And it's very hard for black to play. And if the moment you get scared, you don't want to do that, you can always play bishop h4 and just castle kingside and get a fine game. But it's tricky for black to play this if they don't know it. So this is like a more rare sideline that I'd recommend. The main line is also pretty good. I think like this is like a decent try for white. The club players usually don't know what to do here. They often play h3, which I feel like is fine on an evaluation. But like most club players lose. So like you have to like be really careful here. I think the best probably path, if you don't know what you're doing, is to play like queen c2, rook d1, and just kind of try to expand on this side of the board. and it's just very safe. I don't think like it's the most threatening for black, but it's very safe for white, and you don't have to know as much to play in that way. Probably the all-time best move objectively is bishop e3. So like after c6, bishop e3. This is the main line of the main lines. It gets crazy. There's like knight g4 against it. There's attempts by black to like ignore what you're doing and expand. There's attempts for them to like attack down the middle at your pawn or go for the king side. So you really have to know it. And so I would only study bishop e3 if you know someone was an old Indian player. Like if you're playing against me and you know I love the old Indian, then maybe study bishop e3 and come up with like a weapon against the setup. But otherwise, you know, one wrong move by white and you're busted in these positions, and it is tricky to play. So queen c2 is the less drama option, with the idea of rook d1 and just like b4, rook b1, and eventually like c5 is your goal. Okay, so we've covered a lot of openings. I was super brief. I apologize if you wanted me to like really go like all the options you had against King's Indian and stuff like that. Maybe in a future video, but I just wanted to cover to give you a feel for what kinds of things are, and just be kind of blunt about what I would recommend playing against each of those setups. So hopefully this has given you kind of a tour of the D4 funhouse mirrors of all the different options at black's disposal and some of the things you can play against it. And I hope you've enjoyed this video.